Le podcast.
Humain demain.
Hi there, this is Gaëtan from The Flares. This podcast is usually in French, but we occasionally invite English-speaking guests. This is the case for this episode. Didier Cornel, Vice-President of the French Transhumanist Association, will join me as a co-host. Today, we have the pleasure of talking with Brenda from the organization Afrolongevity. Can you briefly introduce yourself, Brenda, and what motivation led you to be part of the creation of Afrolongevity and the TAFT, Transdisciplinary Agora for the Future Discussion, and maybe if you can explain what these organizations are?
My name is Brenda Ramokopelwa. I am the CEO of TAFT and also the co-founder of Afrolongevity. So I'm based in South Africa, and so as part of TAFT, we are a technology and science organization with the whole aim of developing futurists in Africa. So the science leg of our organization is where Afrolongevity was founded. And the focus for Afrolongevity is to look at longevity for Africans living in Africa and outside of Africa. And also people that are not of African descent that are living in Africa, because we truly believe that your longevity is influenced by your lifestyle, is influenced by your environment, and we want to promote research in Africa to try to find solution to improve our life expectancy. Currently, the life expectancy in Africa is quite low. And this is the continent with the youngest population, the continent with a lot of diverse communities. We have a population of about 1.6 billion people here. The median age in Africa is 19, which means that according to the reports, we do not have a lot of people living to about, living longer in Africa. So we want to start the investigation to look at what the causes might be. We know what has happened with a lot of communicable diseases that wiped a lot of Africans off. But from a longevity point of view, we want to see if there might be something in Africa that is affecting our life expectancy. Is there something that we can do to improve that life expectancy? And also validate the reports that are there or challenge the reporting that is there, because we truly believe that there is not enough research available coming from Africa. There is research about Africa, but not done by Africans. So we want to promote that within Africa and ensure that whatever information is put out there has been validated and it is a true reflection of what's happening in the continent.
So how would you describe the situation of transhumanism in South Africa and maybe in Africa in general? Is it something that's well known, or is it perceived as maybe a fringe idea from the West or something like that? And the same question for specifically the idea of healthy life extension, living longer than life expectancy usually in a country.
So I'll start with your first question about transhumanism as a concept. I think it's a new concept to Africa, and the part of the work that we are doing from TAFT and Afrolongevity is try to educate people about what transhumanism is and what it is not. One of our officers, who's the head of the African markets, Abdul, is the president of Transhumanist Africa. And part of the work that he is doing as well in Nigeria and trying to spread the word across the African continent is about the benefits of transhumanism and what it is that we can learn from those principles. I mean, if you just take two of their principles, which is around, super intelligence and super longevity, those are the things that Africans would love to have and would love to promote and would love to be part of. But I think how the concept or how the concept has been received or how it is understood is a bit of a problem in that, or is a bit of a challenge in that without good understanding of what it is, you start making your own conclusions and your own assumptions, and you just start thinking about transhumanism being computers replacing people, taking away morals. There's no ethics, there's no this, there's no that. So I think for Africa, it is not a concept that is not welcomed, but rather a concept that is not understood yet. I mentioned the fact that we've got a very young population. These are people that are interested in innovation. These are people that are interested in learning about new concepts and are embracing advancement. So I think the more education we share or the more knowledge we share with these people, it is a concept that can really take off at high speed, and it will be very well embraced. And then the second question was around longevity and how that is understood. Again, healthy living in Africa is something that we aspire to, is something that we want, just like any other human across the world. Unfortunately, the circumstances that Africa has are such that we do not have, one, the infrastructure that are required to promote healthy living. We do not have the resources, or the resources that we have are limited, and therefore cannot reach most of the Africans that are living in Africa. So yes, we want healthy living. We strive for healthy living. I mean, that is, you can see that in the way people live in our villages, in the rural areas, because as you know, Africa is mostly rural. Those people still eat food that they have planted, food that is organic, and that is what they strive for. Those people are very active on a daily basis because the type of work that they do is labor intensive. That in itself, keeping the body active, that is exercise. Eating organic food, that means that, you can have the right nutrients and you can live healthier and longer. But the problem is that because of lack of infrastructure and lack of resources, there's a lot of infectious diseases that Africans are exposed to, and they do not have the required resources to combat those diseases. And that becomes an issue that counteracts whatever they are doing to try to keep healthy and all of that. So I think healthy living, is something that we really want. And through Afrolongevity and TAFs, we are trying to see how we can collaborate with our counterparts across the world to find solutions that will work for Africa, because not every solution will work for Africa. One, find that solution that can work for Africa. Two, see what it is that we have that we can still use for our benefit without having to spend money, because it's not all about money. Sometimes you'll find that there are things that we can already do without, spending the money, without, going through research for a long time. Things that we are already doing, but we do not know, or we are not aware of the benefits that they have. So we can start to do more of those things and stop doing the things that might be unhealthy or affecting our health. If we know about that, then we can start doing that. And then, how can we use what we have to be creative and be innovative around longevity, about healthy living? Our hospitals are not at a level, especially public hospitals, are not at a level where we would like for them to be. What is it that the government can do from a health sector point of view to drive resources into ensuring we've got the right infrastructure? Instead of spending money on sick care, can they take a portion of that money and fund this research to ensure that we advance longevity, we find solutions for longevity? So for us, it's a partnership between government institutions because they make policies that can affect healthy living negatively or positively. So the policymakers become important. It is a partnership with academic institutions because, as I said, we need knowledge, we need to do research and promote this. And also private sector as well. Funding is required to ensure that we get this research off the ground. We have these solutions that that are needed from a technology point of view, but also the education that is needed across the African continent. Africa is a huge continent, 55 different countries, so many different languages, so many diverse cultures. So therefore, education means you need to translate whatever it is that you're coming with in the language that people will understand. You need to reach those people because they are not always available online like we are talking. You need to go to those rural areas and make sure that you are able to communicate and make sure they understand these things. So it will take a lot of funding and a lot of work. So private institutions can help us to really drive the message and make sure that all of those three parties, when they come together, we can make talk in the longevity.
So a few months ago, you were organizing a summit longevity in South Africa. And also just a few weeks ago, we were together in Cameroon for French-speaking forum on bioethics and especially on longevity. Can you tell us in a few words maybe what was the most what were the most interesting parts in those two conferences? And also, so I know that you are organizing in a little bit less than 1 year, probably even bigger conference in Nigeria. So a few words about this also.
Thank you so much, Lydia. So yes, we had our conference on the 23rd and 24th of August. It was the first longevity conference in the continent. So it was a successful conference. We had about 33 different countries represented at our conference. We had about 100 or so, depending on the day, delegates attending in and out. We had representation from the different sectors. We had government people that were there. The MEC of Health in Gauteng came through to do a keynote address. We had the mayor of the city we were hosting there. The chief was also there. Remember, we had said that the whole point of Afrolongevity is to ensure that all of these different parts come together. So there was a good representation from private academic institutions, community as well, because the message has got to go to the community. They need to understand the message. It's one thing for the scientists to look at this thing and, understand it from a scientific point of view, but it is pointless if the person that has got to consume it doesn't understand it. So we are trying to ensure that as scientists come up with solutions, or academic institutions come up with the knowledge, scientists come up with solutions, we ensure that the people, which is us, which is me, my child, my grandmother, they also understand the importance of this and they understand what they need to do and what it means to them. We make sure that the politicians, because government, in some cases, those people, the policymakers are politicians, they're not necessarily the experts in the field. They also understand it in that language. So we had a good representation of that. It was a very good conference. It ran for 2 days. The point that we made was that longevity is for everybody. We all need to get involved. The education is very, very important, and which is a message that we keep lauding wherever we go. So the next conference that Didier is talking about, going to Nigeria, will be the second installment of the many conferences around longevity that we are going to have across the African continent. The reason why we are going to another country is that, as we said, Afrolongevity is for the whole of Africa. We have 55 countries. We would like to understand what longevity means for them and how longevity can be part of what they do in their own context. Because the way we receive it in South Africa might be different to a person in Kenya, might be different to a person in Cameroon, because of the different circumstances that they have. So we are trying to hear their voice and hear what it is that they need and what solution they can come up so that we can work together with them to try and find these solutions. So in Cameroon as well, my presentation was around the paradigm shift of healthy living in Africa. So again, talking about Afrolongevity, to say what we have always known healthy living to be needs to change. We really need to start thinking of health in a different way. What healthcare is in Africa is definitely not healthcare. We are looking at the effects of diseases, not the causes of diseases. We need to change that focus and focus on what are the causes, what can we do to address these issues so that it can help us to manage the symptoms. Because to me, all of these diseases that are coming as a result of ages, they are just symptoms. So it doesn't help if we keep dealing with or putting a plaster on the wound, not solving, the actual source or the root cause. So it was about that to say, let's start thinking about changing how we think about healthy living. Let's start thinking about how we change our education system to ensure that longevity is part of the program. At this point in time, there's not a single university or an institution of higher learning in Africa that has got longevity as part of the program. I think for me, that is the biggest program. And that is something that we want to start introducing to the different institutions of higher learning so that it becomes part of the education. It's not something that you need to be old to start prioritizing. You have to start aiding. So with the young population that we have, I think we have the right type of people or the right level that is, that can consume this and understand it and do something with it, and also can benefit better than if we were just giving it to people that have already suffered as a result of aging.
Thank you. And I was wondering as well if you sometimes are in contact with local governments in South Africa or other countries in Africa, just to do some lobby or try to promote your work to them, and what can be done at this level of organization?
Yes, we are. If you look at our first conference that we had, even though it was not a longevity conference, we had a Generation 4 IR conference that we had. It was the first in-person conference of TAFs. It was supported by the Department of Tourism. It is a government department. The second conference that we had, the first conference was the one where we launched Afrolongevity. This year's conference that we had specifically for longevity, what also supported by the Department of Health, because the MEC did the keynote speech there. We had the mayor of the city coming to listen to what was said in longevity. These are the people that obviously we had spoken to, we had lobbied, we have made them aware of what we are doing. The Department of Tourism remains one of our biggest supporters because they really help us when we are hosting these conferences. In terms of parliament lobbying and policy changes, we are not at that stage yet, but we are doing work towards that. Because as you are saying, we really believe that science and technology needs to be at the forefront of any cardinal pillar in any government. So this is something that we are hoping that, we will be able to influence with the small steps that we are making, speaking to the relevant department, like the Department of Health, Department of Tourism, in the sense that medical tourism is big and it can be very, very important from an economic point of view. So those are the type of influences that we are starting with, and hoping that as we show the work that we are doing, as they start to see the benefit, it will start to influence others, and it will open doors for us in other departments, and we can start to hear those people speaking. We have also signed agreements with the Center of Industrial Research or Industrial Scientific Research in South Africa. And these are the people that are taking all of these new innovations and putting them through all of the scientific tests that they need to go to a point where they even put the stuff in the market. So we've just signed an MOU with them as well to ensure that when we do the work that we do, we ensure that it follows the right process. And if it is compliant and follows the right process, it makes it easier for the people at government level and policy level to start to listen to us and take us seriously.
In Cameroon, when Auprès, the famous longéviste, was speaking, he insisted, and you also, about the fact that Africa is a very diverse country for languages, and this can be interesting, but also for genetic diversity. And this is, of course, also very important for longevity research. So, and we had discussions, you and me, Brenda, about possible supercentenarians in Africa, and if it is the case that there are especially long-living supercentenarians in Africa, it could be for genetic reasons. Do you know if there are already projects or concerning studying especially genetic diversity in the 4 aspects of longevity somewhere in Africa, or do you have plans for this?
Yes and no. So are there any studies being done around genetic diversity in Africa? Yes. Specifically for longevity, not that I know of. And this is the work that we intend to start with, because we believe that there are supercentenarians in Africa. They have just not been reported on. So there's a lot of data that is available in Africa, but it is not being made available for the world to know, or for the world to look at, challenge, criticize, complement, whatever the case might be. And part of the work that we want to do is to start to unearth that and to start taking that and putting it on top of the table. So as far as supercentenarians are concerned, there's a lot of reports about people that are dying at the age of 110, 128 that are being reported in the news. Do we have that at a level where it has already been scientifically verified for longevity purposes? Not yet. And that is what we intend to work with. So we've already contacted people that are dealing with population stats and all of that to find out what is it that they already have, and then, so that they can point us to the right direction. And we are going to have conversations with people around this. And we are hoping that at our next conference, we'll be able to provide an extensive report around that information. So the second thing that you asked about was around the genetic, the Africa being rich in terms of genetics. Yes. As we all know, Africa is the cradle of humankind. Actually, as part of the conference that we had, our post-event tour was to take some of our delegates and speakers to what is believed to be the cradle of humankind, the actual caves, and where they tell a story of, the history and, the different diversity that come from that particular region. something that, everyone who's interested can, visit the Marupen caves and read about all of that history. But having said that, we really think that we have not done enough to around, looking at those genetics and what they mean to us and what they mean to longevity. And I think it will be very interesting to start to look at this rich diversity that exists in Africa with a lens of longevity. What does it mean to longevity? What is it that we can take from that and benefit people in the long run? And, what are the things that we need to discard from that?
I forgot to precise, not for you, Brenda, because you know about it, but for the listeners, that a supercentenarian is a person who lives 110 years or more, and there are very, very few supercentenarians in the world. For example, in my country, Belgium, there is one person who is older than 110, or who reached 110 years. And this is a kind of what I sometimes call the mystery of supercentenarians. Very, very few people. Well, we have in the world probably more than 200,000-300,000 people age 100 or more, but we have only very, very few people who are 110 or more, less than 500.
Yeah, I really think that there's not a lot of them, but I think there are.
And that's fascinating to imagine that there might be, and we don't know about them just because, they're not reported, and that's very interesting. I've never really thought about this. And also, I'm curious to know if sometimes through your work, you encounter criticism that are very specific to Africa, because when we talk about longevity, there is a lot of objections that people come up with, like, it's natural to live at a certain age and then die, or it's going to be a source of inequality. Some people are going to be living forever and others dying, different objections. And I'm wondering if you think sometimes you might have very specific criticism for Africa that we don't really see here, just because of that diversity and different maybe origin stories or mythology sometimes play a role in these questions.
The challenges are very interesting, and depending on who you talk to, they vary. So there's obviously, when you're speaking to a religious group, depending at the level of understanding, people might think, when you start talking about longevity, you're trying to play God. And as you know, Africa is because of colonization and all of that, it's very Christian. Well, most of it. And then you've got, Muslims as well. So it becomes a very sensitive topic. You need to, and this is where, again, that education and awareness becomes important to us, because for Africa, it's not a natural, listen, you're going to live healthy and you're going to live longer, or, to them, it translates to, are you saying you're not going to die? Are you saying you are ashamed of being old? Are you, and remember, we also value older people. So it's almost like you are trying to play God, like I said, you are interfering with nature. So there's religious challenges that comes with that. They believe in the afterlife and whatever, you are facing those challenges. Also, we are in Africa very cultural, in the sense that there's people that believe in spiritism and spirituality. So depending on who you are talking to, the question of longevity might pose certain questions that are being challenged. Again, it's how you communicate the message, how the message is received, and making sure that people understand what longevity is and what it is not. And our focus has always been healthy living, healthy lifespan, which might in turn lead to a longer lifespan. But the focus is more on healthy living. And, the outcomes becomes just the benefits that comes with it. Again, the introduction of technology, because, at some point you need to use technology to do, and then this is where now they think that transhumanism is just about cloning people. And, so it's a bit of an ethical, moral challenge that you really have to scale very, very carefully and ensure that when I speak to young people in Africa, the type of how I communicate that message will be different to when I'm speaking to my grandmother in the village. And if I'm speaking to a religious leader, it will also be different. It's still the same message, but how I communicate it will be different. A policymaker or a government official, how they understand it will be totally different. What will drive them to accept or embrace it will be totally different to a person on the street.
Usually the type of the reaction of the community that comes to for example, you organized a conference in Johannesburg a few months ago. When you invite the community, the member of the community, what's the typical reaction? Also, what are the insights about the interventions from African speakers during this conference that you organize?
The initial reaction when you're talking about longevity and you're just talking about it from a scientific point of view to a person who doesn't understand the science is it's defensive. This cannot happen. It has not happened. What makes you think that it will happen? And then when you start to present the science in a way that they understand it, then there is curiosity. This is what we've seen in our conference. When we launched Afrolongevity in 2021, there was a lot of rejection and a lot of pushback. In 2022, when we had our longevity conference, there was a bit more reception and a bit more curiosity, because what we did after the launch was do community outreach program, where we started explaining what it is, where we started talking about healthy living and the benefits of that. And this is something that they know, that if you are healthy, you can live longer. And we talk about those benefits. And then we start to explain what that is. I think the problem is the name they are not familiar with. So if you start with the name, it's a bit, I don't know it, so I don't want it. So if you start to explain the process and what it is and the benefits and all of that, and say, actually, this thing that we're talking about, it is longevity. This thing that we're talking about, it is this transhumanism that we're talking about. It becomes easier. So there was a bit more positive reception and a bit more, we want to know more. There's a lot of interest right now, because even post the conference, we had to go back and talk about what was presented at the conference and explain it further. So there's a lot more interest in academic institutions. There's a lot more interest in the Department of Health, especially in the province that we are in. I am not saying that there's not going to be challenges, especially when we start to go into the different regions and the different provinces, especially when you start going into the rural areas. Remember, Johannesburg is in a city, and the city that is very diverse, and there's a lot of advancement here. So it's easy to consume new concepts when they come here. When you start moving into the rural area, the tone has got to change, the messaging has got to change, and the reception might not be the same. So we are prepared, I want to say, for the challenges, but because there is the unknowns, we are willing to go and ride the wave and get to know them, because even though we are in South Africa, I spoke about diversity earlier on. Just in South Africa, we've got a whole lot of different languages, but 12 official languages. That tells you that if there's 12 official languages, it means there's a lot more cultures and a lot more languages that might not be official, And it means the backgrounds, are quite different. So it's a step by step. It becomes even more difficult now if I go to Nigeria, which is all the way in the West region. The culture is totally different. I was saying to Didier the other day when we attended the Cameroon conference, to say the culture there is totally different from what I'm used to in South Africa. But there is one thing that is common throughout Africa, the thing that, brings us together, our communal nature, our African way of living, it is still the same. Just like any other human anywhere in the world, we also want to be healthy. We also want to live longer. We also want the best for ourselves and our communities. And I think that is the one thing that will help us to learn this message, because there's nobody who will say that they don't want the best for themselves. And so we are using that and to ensure that the message goes through, that it has to go through in the way that makes sense for a person in that particular country, in that particular setting, in that particular culture.
For me, yeah, like you say, good food, exercise, good habits, less pollution, and so on. All this is, of course, very important. But the point is, we cannot live longer than 100 and 120 at the moment if we don't have other progress. And this is always very, very, very complicated to explain to everybody. Well, not only in Africa, and sometimes even more in other parts of the world than in Africa, because people are less open to new technologies, probably in parts of the world like Europe. And maybe I would like you to speak a bit about one of the positive aspects in the whole of Africa, at least the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, is the very young, also in North Africa, the very young population, and more openness to technological progress. So maybe you have a few examples of communities or groups who are working especially on some longevity question or even some technological question that we don't have in Europe, or where you think it could be really useful to promote this?
It's gonna be hard for me to single out a project and call it a longevity project, because we have not, longevity, as I said, is still new in the country. But yes, you are right. A young population, very innovative, very creative, and very hungry for knowledge. So there's a lot of advancements that are happening in the continent, despite the limited resources or infrastructure that we have. I mean, we saw during the COVID pandemic, where there were a lot of scientists coming up with solutions within Africa, even though at some point that was used against us when Africans were finding solutions. So I think the biggest issue for us is the narrative around, is it good enough when it comes to Africa? And that is the work that we are doing to just change that narrative, because sometimes when you're presenting something from Africa, it's almost like it needs to be checked a few more times for it to be accepted, globally. But despite that, there's a lot of work that is being done. If you look at scientists across the different foundations talking about longevity, there's a lot of Africans that are working there. The issue that we have is around is brain drain in Africa, because we don't have infrastructure. These young people, as brilliant as they are, instead of staying in Africa and doing the work in Africa and developing, they are finding better opportunities outside of Africa, and therefore we are left without that knowledge and that expertise in the continent. So what we would like to do, and I see a lot of governments are doing that. Rwanda is leading in terms of technology. South Africa is another economy that is really, really thriving in terms of science and technology. Nigeria, as you know, it has been the giant of Africa for a long time. Despite the unstable political climate, there are brilliant minds that are sitting there, and they are doing a lot of work in terms of technology innovation and all of that. So for me, I think that it is about what we need to do is to start to showcase what those people are doing. When we had our longevity conference, we introduced an innovation competition. We wanted to know what young people think around longevity and what solutions do they think will work for Africans. The feedback, we had a lot of submissions. The only problem that we saw throughout was that the concept is not yet fully understood. And therefore, the entries that we got were not very clear as far as longevity is concerned. But as far as innovation is concerned, for healthy living, there's a lot of, you can see there's a lot of raw material that needs development, and if given a chance, can develop into something quite big. I know that the University of Cape Town is really big in terms of biomedicine and preventative medicine, and that is something that they are working hard towards. The Northwest University as well is doing a lot of work on that. And as I said, the CSIR, which is the Center for Scientific Research, is producing a lot of Afrocentric solutions, medicine and all of that. And I think that, if we start to promote that, and if we start to put a lot of effort and focus on scientific research and technology advancement, we've got a chance of really, really going far.
Another question that I have is regarding maybe other aspects of futurism. Like we talk a lot about these days artificial intelligence, of course, and I was curious to know your personal view on artificial intelligence, if it's something you talk about with Taft. And in Africa in general, do you think people are excited about the idea of AGI, artificial general intelligence, and how is it perceived? Do we also find the risk factor there? Because, we hear sometimes the idea of an existential risk caused by artificial intelligence. So I was wondering what's the situation in Africa regarding this, and maybe other topic in futurism, like space or other things related to human enhancement, for example?
Technology advancement is something that, really, I think that Africans are very interested and excited about. Artificial intelligence is already embedded in a lot of those technologies that we've got, especially when you look at our banking sector, which is one of the best in the world. I mean, some of those algorithms are already built in there, and they are competing with the best in the world. And when it comes to medicine, we might be, it may be a bit slow, but there's a lot of work that's being done. If you go to our different hospitals, the only problem is that private hospitals, of course, you will find that there's a lot of technology advancement or technology tools that are being introduced that are doing amazing things. Now, if you're just talking about AGI and the rest that are there, I think just like any other country or any other environment, there's a fear of what AGI can be and cannot be. There's a fear of how it can surpass humans and do things that really would not be beneficial to humans. But I think from a risk management point of view, we need to start looking at this thing differently. I always say we need to look at risk as an opportunity and as a threat, not only as a threat. Yes, there's risk. What does that mean? Right? You need to now, before that risk materializes, be already looking at it, understanding what it is, and then planning for it. You need to say, you need to understand, we cannot understand it. We cannot manage the risk of a technology if you do not understand the technology itself. So I think the best that we can do right now with all of the threats that we are anticipating or we are seeing, we need to start doing a bit of investigation and a bit of planning in anticipation of what can come. There's risk in everything, and we manage it as we go. It's like saying, I'm really not going to, I'm really not going to buy this new technology because of cybercrime. There's always going to be cybercrime. You need to just manage it. But if you do not understand the technology, and if you don't understand cybersecurity, it might be difficult for you to go there. You might be more at risk not knowing than just, than knowing about it and doing something about it. So I think in Africa, because there's so much excitement about innovation, creation, and invention, a lot of investment is going into understanding those risks and planning for coming up with the different strategies of managing those risks. Because managing risk is not only about, mitigating it. It can also be, I accept that this thing is going to be a problem, but I think the benefits are better than not taking the risk at all. Also, it might be total avoidance. I will take the risk, but this part of it, I don't think I can manage it. Therefore, I cannot deal with it. Or let me transfer it to something else. I know that it will hit me hard, but because I want to take it, I want to make sure that I've got a contingency somewhere for in case something goes wrong. So in Africa, one thing, as I said, there is excitement about this. We want it, but we want to do it in such a way that it will work for us and not work against us.
Yes, I think it's important to include everyone when we talk about artificial intelligence, because at the moment it looks like there is a small group of people and big companies developing what might become artificial general intelligence, and so they really have to think about the rest of humanity, everyone, everywhere. I don't know if Didier, you have something else you want to ask, because we're reaching the end and...
Not especially expect that to say that I will try to be in Nigeria in a little bit less than 1 year, and I hope to have, and I'm sure, I'm almost sure I will have very interesting conversations, especially concerning AI and longevity, one of my favorite subjects. But maybe, Brenda, you have something to add. You will be in a few weeks in Utrecht. What will be your main theme in January? So for Transvision 2024, the 19, 20, and 21 of January, what will be your main theme, and are there things that you want to say that we forgot to ask?
Without giving out too much, because I would like for people to attend Transvision Utrecht, I'm excited about that. So I'll be talking about Afrolongevity and the work that we are doing here, but the focus will be on health policy. There are a lot of challenges around the policies, health policies, especially in terms of how they cater for longevity, which I think at the moment they don't. And I think that we need to talk about how do we ensure that the policies that we have in our health sector are in such a way that we promote preventative care, preventative medicine, and instead of just looking at waiting for people to be sick and want to do something about it. Let's start looking at the causes of the diseases and not only focus on the effects of disease. And with that, how do we start to look at things like, protection of data, sharing of data, data supremacy, whatever different data policies are affecting how we promote healthy living across the globe. Because how we share or not share the data, how we share or not share the innovation might impact on how we bring the longevity movement. So those are some of the aspects that I would like for us to discuss at that conference and see if maybe we can come up with solutions that can help all of us.
Thank you very much for your time and to share your knowledge and what you're doing with Afrolongevity and all your work. Where can we find more about you and is there a place where we can find more information on Afrolongevity? I suppose the website. Are you also on social media, or I don't know if...
Before I even share that, please, everyone is invited to our second longevity conference in Nigeria. It will be on the 9th and 10th of October 2024. Now, to find more about TEPS, you can go to teps.org, and Afrolongevity is just one of the pages under the website. Or you can go just directly to Afrolongevity at teps.org. You can send emails, maybe if you want to inquire about us, at info@afrolongevity.org or info@teps.org. And we are available on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook as teps.org.
Right. Well, the links will be in the description. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenda.
Le podcast
Humain demain.